In a quiet corner of the galaxy, far from Earth's bustling colonies and trade routes, an alien species known as the Veilith lived in harmony with their oceanic world. Their cities glowed softly beneath the waves, powered by bioluminescent coral and ancient technology that blended seamlessly with nature. But peace is fragile when faced with forces beyond comprehension. It began subtly, a faint hum rippling through the water, vibrations too low for most creatures to detect. Then came the black tendrils. At first, they appeared harmless, drifting lazily like seaweed caught in a current. But soon, those tendrils latched onto coral reefs, draining them of color and life. Schools of fish vanished overnight. Entire ecosystems collapsed within days. The Veilith were no strangers to hardship. They had survived volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and even brief ice ages. But this was different. This wasn't natural. It felt intentional. When their scientists analyzed the phenomenon, they discovered something chilling. These tendrils weren't random anomalies. They were part of a larger entity, an intelligent swarm called the Devouring Veil. Desperation gripped the Veilith Council. Their weapons were useless against the Veil. Energy shields flickered under its touch, and physical barriers crumbled like sandcastles before a storm. With time running out, they made a decision unprecedented in their history. They would send a distress signal into the stars. For centuries, the Veilith had avoided contact with other species, fearing exploitation or conflict. Now, survival outweighed caution. The message traveled across light years, carried on radio waves and quantum pulses. It contained images of their dying world, recordings of their pleas, and coordinates marking their location. "Help us," it said simply, "or we will perish." On Earth, the signal reached a monitoring station orbiting Jupiter. Scientists scrambled to decode it, their excitement quickly turning to dread as they realized the urgency of the plea. Humanity had only recently joined the interstellar community, still finding its footing among older, more advanced civilizations. They lacked the firepower to take on something like the Veil alone. But there was one group who might have what it took: the Deathworlders. Few humans knew much about the Deathworlders, except that they hailed from planets so hostile that survival itself was a triumph. Acid storms raged on some worlds, while others crushed inhabitants under gravity 10 times stronger than Earth's. These harsh environments bred resilience, adaptability, and strength unmatched by most species. Over time, several Deathworld factions formed an alliance, not because they liked each other, but because cooperation meant survival. When Earth's diplomats approached the Deathworlder fleet, skepticism filled the air. Why should they risk themselves for strangers? What did they gain from helping weaklings? Yet, curiosity lingered. The Veilith's plight intrigued them. Could such a formidable foe truly exist? And if so, could defeating it elevate the Deathworlder's status among the stars? Kale Draxus, leader of the fleet, listened silently as Earth's ambassador presented their case. His towering frame cast a shadow over the room, his metallic exosuit gleaming under artificial lights. He had seen countless battles, endured unimaginable hardships, and led his people through wars that left entire planets barren. Helping others had never been part of his creed. Survival came first. Always. But something stirred inside him as he watched footage of the Veilith suffering. Cities reduced to ruins, families torn apart, hope fading like sunlight through murky waters. Perhaps it wasn't compassion he felt, but recognition. Once, his own people had faced extinction. Perhaps now, they could prevent another race from meeting the same fate. As Kel weighed the decision, the rest of the fleet debated fiercely. Some argued that aiding outsiders would weaken their unity. Others saw potential rewards, new allies, advanced tech, even glory. Meanwhile, the Veilith sent another transmission, their voices trembling with fear. "Please hurry," they begged. "We cannot hold on much longer." For now, the Deathworlders remained undecided. But deep down, everyone knew one truth. Whether they chose to act or not, the galaxy would remember their choice forever. And somewhere in the void, the devouring veil continued its relentless march, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that help might be coming. The Deathworlder fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Their ships were jagged and brutal in design, resembling floating fortresses cobbled together from scrap metal and alien alloys. Each vessel bore scars of countless battles, burn marks from plasma cannons, dents from asteroid collisions, and patches where hull breaches had been hastily repaired. These weren't sleek cruisers built for exploration. They were war machines forged in fire and fury. At the heart of this fleet stood Cal Draxus, a towering figure whose presence commanded respect and fear. Born on a high-gravity world where even walking required immense strength, Cal's body was dense and powerful, his muscles honed by decades of surviving under crushing pressure. His metallic exosuit amplified his already formidable abilities, making him nearly unstoppable in combat. Yet what truly set him apart wasn't his physical prowess, it was his mind. Cal was a strategist, a survivor who understood that victory often came not from brute force, but from calculated risks. Around him gathered representatives from other Deathworld factions, each as unique as their home planets. There were the Pyrrhicans, insectoid beings with chitinous armor and razor-sharp claws, hailing from a planet scorched by perpetual wildfires. Beside them stood the Gyrek, amphibious creatures with translucent skin and gills, adapted to thrive in toxic swamps filled with corrosive gases. Even among these hardened survivors, tension simmered. The Deathworlders were united only by necessity, bound together by shared trauma rather than trust. When Earth's ambassadors arrived aboard the flagship Iron Vanguard, they found themselves dwarfed both physically and emotionally. The air inside the ship was thick with tension, punctuated by low growls and guttural exchanges between species. Screens displayed maps of the galaxy, highlighting the Veilith system, a distant speck surrounded by ominous red markers indicating Veil activity. Earth's lead negotiator, Ambassador Elena Vega, stepped forward. Her voice trembled slightly but carried determination. "We need your help," she began, projecting holographic images of the Veilith's plight. "If the Veil consumes them, it won't stop there. It could spread to other systems, including ours." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some Deathworlders scoffed openly at the idea of risking their lives for strangers. Others leaned closer, intrigued by the challenge. One Pyrrhican leader, Kaarthik, clicked his mandibles impatiently. "Why should we care about fish people drowning in their own oceans? Let them die." Kale raised a hand, silencing the room. He studied the holograms carefully, his sharp eyes narrowing. "This Veil," he rumbled, turning to face Vega. "You say it feeds on life itself." Vega nodded. "Yes, it doesn't just destroy, it consumes everything. Energy, matter, ecosystems. Nothing escapes it." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Kale turned to his advisors, speaking in a language too guttural for human ears to comprehend. When he faced the assembly again, his expression was unreadable. "Tell me more about the Veilith," he said finally. "What makes them worth saving?" Elena hesitated before answering. She knew honesty might be her best weapon here. They're peaceful, creative. They've developed technology that works with nature instead of against it. And right now, they're fighting for survival, with courage most civilizations wouldn't show. Cal's gaze lingered on her, searching for deception. Finally, he turned back to the map. "Courage means little without strength," he muttered. But something flickered in his eyes, a memory, perhaps, of his own people struggling against impossible odds. As discussions continued, fractures within the fleet became apparent. The Gyrek argued that helping outsiders would dilute their unity, while the Pyrrhicans saw potential rewards in acquiring new resources. Amidst the chaos, a young human engineer named Mai approached Zixra, a Pyrrhican mechanic tinkering with a damaged console. Tentatively, she offered assistance. To everyone's surprise, Zixra accepted, and the two began working side by side. It was a small gesture, but it planted a seed. Maybe cooperation wasn't so foreign after all. By the end of the meeting, Kale hadn't committed to anything, not yet. But as he watched Mai and Sixra exchange cautious smiles, he felt a faint stirring of hope. Perhaps this alliance, however fragile, could work. After all, even legends are born from unlikely beginnings. The decision to aid the Vailith wasn't made lightly or quickly. For days, the Deathworlder fleet remained locked in heated debate, their leaders arguing over strategy, risk, and reward. Kale Draxus listened silently as factions clashed, his sharp gaze flicking between speakers like a predator watching prey. He knew better than anyone that unity among the Deathworlders was fragile at best. Convincing them to fight for strangers would take more than logic. It would require something deeper. Ambassador Elena Vega returned daily, armed with data, holograms, and impassioned pleas. She showed footage of the Vale's devastation. Cities swallowed whole, oceans drained dry, families huddled together in fear. This isn't just about the Vailith, she insisted one evening, her voice steady despite the weight of exhaustion. If we don't stop the Vale here, it will spread. No planet, not even yours, will be safe. Her words struck a nerve. The Pyrrhicans muttered uneasily, their insectoid antennae twitching. Even Vtarthik, who had been vocal in his opposition, fell silent. The Gyrek exchanged glances, their translucent skin glowing faintly, a sign of agitation. They understood survival better than most. If the Vale could consume an entire oceanic civilization, what hope did they have? But skepticism lingered. Why should we trust you? Demanded Zixra, the Pyrrhican mechanic who had begun working alongside Mai. Her claws clicked against the metal table as she leaned forward. You humans are weak. Your ships break easily. What do you bring to this fight? Elena hesitated, then gestured to a nearby console. We bring knowledge, she replied, pulling up schematics of ancient alien technology recovered from Earth's ruins. These artifacts predate the Vale. Studying them might give us an edge. Kale studied the designs closely, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. Knowledge is valuable, he admitted grudgingly. But it's not enough. We'll need resources too: fuel, weapons, reinforcements. Earth's diplomats scrambled to meet these demands, pooling everything they had. Old alliances were called upon, favors cashed in, and stockpiles emptied. In return, the Deathworlders agreed to share their own expertise. Advanced shielding systems, resilient alloys, and tactics honed through centuries of warfare. It was a trade born of desperation, but also necessity. As preparations began, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Humans and Deathworlders worked side by side. Though trust remained thin, crew members whispered rumors about each other, some admiring the Deathworlders' strength, others wary of their ruthlessness. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders themselves argued constantly, old rivalries flaring under the stress of collaboration. Despite the friction, small moments of connection emerged. Me and Zixra grew closer as they repaired damaged engines, their mutual love of tinkering bridging cultural divides. One evening, while calibrating a power core, Mai handed Zixra a thermos of hot tea. The Pyrrhican sniffed it cautiously before taking a sip, and promptly gagged. Mai burst out laughing, earning a glare from Zixra. But when the mechanic passed the thermos back with a reluctant grin, it marked the start of an unlikely friendship. Kale watched these interactions with quiet interest. He saw how Mai's optimism softened Zixra's cynicism, how shared goals brought people together despite their differences. Perhaps there was merit in this alliance after all. Then came another transmission from the Vailith. Their voices trembled with urgency, barely audible over static. The Vale, it grows faster now. Our cities are gone. Our people, dying. Please hurry. The message silenced the fleet. Even the most hardened warriors looked uneasy. Kale clenched his fists, his mind racing. Whatever awaited them at the Vailith system, it wouldn't be easy. But backing down wasn't an option, not anymore. We leave tomorrow, he announced, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Prepare your ships. This isn't just a mission. It's a test. Prove yourselves worthy, or die trying." No one cheered. There was no celebration, no rallying cry, just grim determination as crews scrambled to ready their vessels. The fragile alliance held, for now. But as the fleet prepared to launch, everyone knew one truth. The real challenge lay ahead. The combined fleet of humans and Deathworlders launched into the unknown, their ships forming a jagged armada that cut through the stars like a blade. The journey to the Violet system would take weeks, but no one dared relax. Every sensor was active, every weapon primed. The devouring veil loomed in their minds, a shadowy predator waiting to strike. At first, the voyage seemed uneventful. The vastness of space stretched endlessly around them, dotted only by distant suns and drifting asteroids. But soon, strange phenomena began to plague the fleet. Ships reported sudden power fluctuations, as if an unseen force was siphoning energy from their systems. Navigation arrays went haywire, sending vessels veering off course before corrections could be made. Even communication channels buzzed with eerie static, occasionally interrupted by faint whispers in languages no one recognized. Mai sat at her console aboard the human cruiser Aurora, frowning as she analyzed the data flooding in from across the fleet. "This isn't natural interference," she muttered, tapping furiously on her keyboard. Zixra leaned over her shoulder, her chitinous claws clicking softly against the metal frame. "Veil?" she asked, her voice low and guttural. "Could be," Mai replied, shivering despite herself. "Whatever it is, it's messing with us before we even get there." Caldraxis felt it too, a heaviness pressing down on his chest, as though the air itself had grown thicker. He stood on the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, staring out at the endless void. His advisors whispered theories about the anomalies, some suggesting they were side effects of the Veil's presence, others warning of traps laid ahead. Kale dismissed them all with a wave of his hand. Speculation wouldn't help. Action would. Then came the disappearances. One night, a scout ship vanished without warning. Its last transmission was garbled, filled with panicked shouts and the sound of tearing metal. Search parties found nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, not even debris. It was as if the ship had been erased from existence. Fear rippled through the fleet, tightening its grip on already frayed nerves. Among the crew, stories spread of ghostly apparitions seen in the corridors, shadowy figures flickering at the edges of vision, vanishing when approached. Some claimed to hear voices calling their names, urging them to step closer to the darkness outside. Scientists scrambled to explain these hallucinations, blaming stress, fatigue, or electromagnetic disturbances. But deep down, everyone wondered, was the Veil reaching out to them? Despite the growing unease, work continued. May and Zixra spent hours repairing damaged systems, their camaraderie providing a small measure of comfort amidst the chaos. One evening, while recalibrating a failing shield generator, Mai paused and looked up at Zixra. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" she asked quietly. Zixra tilted her head, her multifaceted eyes glinting in the dim light. "Right doesn't matter," she replied. "Survival does. If Veil wins, none of us live." May nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her mind. Was survival worth this cost? She pushed the thought aside and returned to her task, focusing on the hum of machinery rather than the whispers echoing in her ears. As the fleet drew closer to the Violet system, the anomalies grew worse. Entire sections of space seemed warped, bending light and distorting reality. Crew members reported vivid dreams of drowning in black oceans, their lungs filling with icy water. Yet through it all, Kale remained resolute. He refused to let fear dictate his actions. When asked how he stayed so calm, he simply said, "Fear kills slower than enemies. Better to face what comes next with clear eyes." Finally, the Veilith homeworld appeared on their scanners, a pale blue orb surrounded by swirling tendrils of darkness. The sight sent a chill through the fleet. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a battle for survival, and perhaps something greater. The violet homeworld loomed before the fleet, its once vibrant oceans now dull and lifeless. Swirling tendrils of black energy wrapped around the planet like a suffocating shroud, pulsing faintly as if alive. From orbit, the devastation was clear. Entire cities reduced to skeletal ruins, coral reefs drained of color, and vast stretches of barren seabeds where thriving ecosystems had once flourished. It was a graveyard in space, silent except for the ominous hum radiating from the veil. Cal Draxus stood on the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, his sharp eyes scanning the scene below. "This is worse than I expected," he muttered, gripping the railing tightly. Beside him, Ambassador Elena Vega stared at the holographic display, her face pale with horror. "They didn't have a chance," she whispered. "If we come sooner." "There's no point dwelling on what could have been," Cale interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "Focus on what we can do now." Before they could finalize their strategy, alarms blared across the fleet. Sensors detected movement, not just the slow creep of the veil, but something faster, more deliberate. Within seconds, tendrils erupted from the planet's atmosphere, lashing out like whips toward the nearest ships. The attack was sudden and merciless. "Evasive maneuvers," shouted Captain Renar of the Gyric cruiser Toxic Tide. His ship banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a tendril that sliced through empty space where it had been moments earlier. Other vessels weren't so lucky. A human frigate was caught mid-turn, its hull breached by a tendril that pierced through like a spear. Screams echoed over comms as oxygen vented into the void, followed by silence. Panic rippled through the fleet, but Kel's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold formation. Don't scatter," he barked, his commanding tone steadying nerves. "Focus fire on the tendrils. They're extensions of the veil. Cut them off." Weapons roared to life. Plasma cannons, laser turrets, and kinetic missiles lighting up the darkness. Tendrils disintegrated under concentrated fire, only to be replaced by new ones sprouting from the veil's mass. For every strike landed, two more threats emerged, relentless and adaptive. The battle quickly turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Amidst the chaos, May worked furiously aboard the Aurora, rerouting power to failing shields, while Zixra patched damaged systems with precision. "We're losing structural integrity," May yelled, sweat dripping down her forehead. "If another tendril hits us, we're done." Zixra clicked her mandibles irritably. "Then don't let them hit us," she snapped, though her tone softened slightly as she added, "Keep those shields up. I'll handle the rest." On the front lines, Kale led a squadron of Deathworlder fighters into the fray, targeting larger clusters of tendrils attempting to overwhelm key ships. His own vessel took heavy damage, chunks of its armor peeling away under repeated assaults. Yet he refused to retreat, knowing that leadership meant leading by example. As the fight raged, one of the Pyrrhican cruisers found itself surrounded, its engines crippled by multiple strikes. Exarthic's voice crackled over comms, defiant even in defeat. "Go ahead and finish it," he growled. "But know this, we die fighting." Kale hesitated for only a moment before making a decision that stunned everyone. He ordered his flagship to position itself between the doomed cruiser and the encroaching tendrils. "All power to forward shields," he commanded. "Protect them at all costs." The Iron Vanguard absorbed the brunt of the attack, its massive frame groaning under the strain. Explosions rocked the ship, sending crew members sprawling. But the sacrifice worked. The Pyrrhican cruiser escaped destruction, limping back to safety. When the initial wave of tendrils finally withdrew, leaving behind smoldering wreckage and battered survivors, an uneasy quiet settled over the fleet. Kale surveyed the damage, his expression grim. They had survived, but barely. And worse, the veil showed no signs of weakening. Among the crew, whispers spread about Cal's actions. Sacrificing his own ship to save others wasn't typical Deathworlder behavior. Some admired his boldness. Others saw it as reckless. But one thing was certain: respect for their leader grew, even among skeptics. For now, they regrouped, licking their wounds and preparing for the next assault. The veil had tested them, and they had endured. But the real fight was yet to come. The fleet retreated to a safe distance, licking its wounds after the devastating ambush. Ships drifted in formation, their hulls scarred and battered, while repair crews worked tirelessly to patch breaches and restore systems. The mood aboard every vessel was somber. Victories felt hollow when survival itself seemed uncertain. But amidst the chaos, hope flickered faintly as the Vailith sent coordinates for a hidden underwater sanctuary. "This is our last refuge," Lyran, a Vailith elder with glowing blue skin, explained through a holographic transmission. Her voice trembled with exhaustion, but carried an undercurrent of determination. "It lies deep within the ocean trench, shielded from the Veil's reach. For now, you must come quickly." Cal Draxus studied the map projected before him, his sharp eyes narrowing. The trench was dangerously close to the heart of the Veil's activity, making it a risky destination. Yet retreating wasn't an option. If they were to stand any chance against the entity, they needed answers and time to regroup. A small strike team was assembled. Kale himself, me, and Zixra, whose combined expertise made them invaluable, and Lyran, who insisted on accompanying them despite her frailty. As they prepared to descend into the alien depths, tensions ran high. None of them knew what awaited below, or if they'd return at all. The journey down was harrowing. Submersibles designed by the Vailith navigated treacherous currents and crushing pressures, their reinforced hulls groaning under the strain. Outside the windows, mutated sea creatures loomed, twisted monstrosities born from the Veil's corruption. Some attacked without warning, slamming against the vessels with enough force to rattle the occupants inside. Others simply watched, their glowing eyes filled with malice. "It's like they're guarding something," Mai murmured, clutching her seat as another shadow passed overhead. Zixra clicked her mandibles impatiently. "Focus on surviving," she growled. "No time for theories." Finally, they'd reached the sanctuary, a cavern illuminated by bioluminescent algae clinging to jagged walls. Inside, remnants of Vailith civilization remained intact, ancient murals depicting celestial beings, intricate machinery humming softly, and crystalline artifacts pulsating with energy. It was beautiful and haunting. Lyran led them to a central chamber where fragments of knowledge had been preserved. Holograms flickered to life, showing images of the Veil's creation. Long ago, an advanced civilization sought to harness its power as a weapon, believing they could control it. Instead, the Veil turned on them, consuming their world before spreading across the stars. The recordings ended abruptly, leaving behind only warnings scrawled in fading glyphs. "Destroy the core or perish." "The core?" Kale asked, turning to Lyran. "Where is it?" Her expression darkened. "Buried deep beneath the planet's crust. Reaching it will require navigating the Veil's domain. And even then..." She hesitated, her luminous skin dimming slightly. "Even then, destroying it may not be enough. The Veil feeds on fear and despair. To stop it, someone must confront its consciousness directly." Silence fell over the group. May glanced nervously at Kull, who stood rigid, processing the information. Finally, he spoke. "If someone has to merge with it, I'll do it." "No," Lyran said firmly, stepping forward. Her voice carried unexpected strength. "This is our burden, not yours. My ancestors created the Veil. It is my duty to end it." Before anyone could argue, she activated a device strapped to her wrist, flooding the chamber with light. When it faded, she was gone, leaving behind only a faint echo of her final words. "Forgive us." The team stared at the empty space, stunned. Then Kale clenched his fists, resolve hardening in his gaze. They had their mission now. Whether they succeeded or failed, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never forget what happened here. The strike team stood frozen in the cavern, the weight of Lyran's sacrifice settling heavily on their shoulders. Her words echoed in their minds. "Forgive us." The Veilith Elder had given her life to activate a beacon that would guide them closer to the Veil's core. But her act also served as a grim reminder of the stakes. If they failed, her sacrifice, and those of countless others, would be for nothing. Caldraxus broke the silence first, his voice low and steady. "We don't have time to mourn," he said, turning to face the group. His metallic exosuit gleamed faintly in the dim light, its surface scratched and dented from earlier battles. "Lurine bought us a chance. Now we take it." May nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the oxygen regulator on her suit. Zixra clicked her mandibles impatiently, her chitinous armor glinting like polished obsidian. Despite their differences, both women shared a look of determination. They couldn't turn back now, not after coming this far. Following the beacon's signal, the team descended deeper into the abyss, navigating tunnels carved by ancient forces. The walls pulsed faintly with veins of black energy, remnants of the Veil's corruption spreading through the planet's crust. Every step felt heavier, as if the air itself resisted their presence. May glanced at the readings on her wrist console, frowning. "Radiation levels are spiking," she whispered. "This place, it's alive. It's testing us," Kale replied grimly. "The closer we get, the harder it fights." Their path grew more treacherous with each passing moment. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to crawl through jagged passages that scraped against their suits. Strange whispers filled the air, echoing in voices neither human nor Deathworlder. Some were taunting, others pleading, all designed to sow doubt and fear. Mai pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block out the sound, but Zixra grabbed her arm firmly. "Stay focused," the Pyrrhican growled. "Fear feeds it." Despite her words, even Zixra wasn't immune. She hesitated briefly when shadows flickered across the walls, forming shapes that resembled faces screaming in agony. Kale noticed but said nothing, knowing everyone had their limits. Instead, he pushed forward, his towering frame clearing debris and obstacles in their way. As they neared the core, the environment shifted dramatically. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber bathed in an eerie green glow. At its center floated a pulsating orb of black energy, the Veil's heart. Tendrils writhed around it like serpents, crackling with power. The air was thick with static electricity, making hair stand on end and equipment malfunction sporadically. "This is it," Mai breathed, her voice barely audible over the hum of energy. She scanned the orb with her instruments, her brow furrowing. "It's sentient. It knows we're here." Before anyone could respond, tendrils lashed out, pinning Zixra to the ground. She roared in defiance, slashing at them with her claws, but they held fast. Kale charged forward, his exosuit enhanced strength, allowing him to tear through the tendrils with brute force. Mai scrambled to help, using a portable EMP device to disable nearby strands. Together, they freed Zixra, who snarled in frustration but remained steadfast. "We can't fight it head-on," Kale said, assessing the situation. "We need to disrupt its consciousness. May, do you see any weak points?" May studied the data streaming across her console, sweat dripping down her face. "There," she exclaimed, pointing to a cluster of glowing nodes surrounding the core. "If we overload those, it might destabilize the entire system." "Then let's move," Kale ordered, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. One by one, the team worked together, dodging attacks and planting explosives near the nodes. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the chamber, causing the orb to writhe violently. But with every blow dealt, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Memories long buried surfaced in their minds. Failures, regrets, fears. For Mai, it was the loss of her family during Earth's early colonization efforts. For Zixra, it was the destruction of her homeworld's forests. And for Kale, it was the image of his people starving under endless acid storms. But they pressed on, refusing to let the veil break them. As the final node exploded, the orb began to collapse inward, its tendrils flailing wildly. A deafening roar filled the chamber, shaking the very foundation of the planet. Kale turned to his team, his expression unreadable. "We've done what we came to do," he said. "Now we run." And run they did, racing back through the collapsing tunnels as the Veil's dying screams echoed behind them. None of them knew if they'd escape in time. But for the first time, hope burned brighter than fear. The team raced through the collapsing tunnels, their footsteps echoing against the crumbling walls as the Veil's dying screams reverberated behind them. The ground shook violently with each step, chunks of rock falling from above like a rain of death. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe, but none of them slowed down, not when survival was within reach. Kale led the way, his massive frame clearing debris and creating a path for May and Zixra. His exosuit's sensors beeped erratically, warning of structural instability ahead. "Keep moving," he barked over the chaos, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "If we stop now, we're dead." Mai stumbled, her legs burning from exhaustion, but Zixra caught her before she hit the ground. "No time to fall," the Pyrrhican growled, yanking her upright. Despite her usual gruffness, there was an unspoken understanding between them now, a bond forged in fire and fear. May nodded weakly, forcing herself to keep running. Behind them, the Veil's core continued to collapse, sending shockwaves rippling through the planet's crust. Sections of the tunnel collapsed entirely, nearly trapping them more than once. Each close call felt like borrowed time, and the weight of impending doom pressed down on all of them. Yet, amidst the terror, something else emerged: clarity. They had faced their fears head-on and survived. That knowledge gave them strength, even if only enough to take one more step. Finally, they reached the cavern where their submersibles awaited. The vehicles were battered but intact, their engines humming faintly in preparation for launch. As they scrambled aboard, Kale paused at the entrance, glancing back toward the depths. The Veil's presence still lingered, its tendrils writhing in agony as the core imploded. He clenched his fists tightly, feeling a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. So much destruction, so many lives lost, for this moment. "Kale," May shouted, snapping him out of his thoughts. "We have to go." He turned and climbed into the lid submersible without another word. The engines roared to life as the team sped upward, leaving the collapsing trench behind. Outside the windows, the mutated sea creatures seemed agitated, fleeing en masse as if sensing the end of their twisted existence. The water around them churned violently, currents pulling in every direction as the planet itself began to destabilize. When they broke the surface, the sight that greeted them was both horrifying and awe-inspiring. Massive geysers erupted across the ocean floor, spewing steam and debris high into the atmosphere. The Veil's tendrils retracted rapidly, retreating into the depths like wounded beasts. For the first time in what felt like forever, sunlight pierced through the dark clouds, illuminating the ruined world below. But the battle wasn't over yet. The fleet awaited their return, its ships battered but ready for action. As the submersibles docked aboard the Iron Vanguard, Kale addressed the crew via comms. "The core is destroyed," he announced, his voice steady despite the fatigue etched into his face. "But the Veil isn't gone completely. It'll regroup elsewhere unless we stay vigilant." Cheers erupted across the fleet, though tempered by the knowledge that victory came at great cost. Lyran's sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone's minds, as did the countless Veilith who had perished defending their homeworld. Still, hope flickered faintly among the survivors, a fragile flame nurtured by resilience and unity. In the days that followed, efforts shifted to stabilizing the planet. Scientists worked tirelessly to repair ecosystems ravaged by the Veil, while engineers salvaged technology left behind by the Veilith. May and Zixra collaborated closely, their partnership stronger than ever. Together, they developed solutions to prevent future devastation, ensuring humanity and the Deathworlders could protect themselves, and others, from similar threats. Kale watched these developments quietly, reflecting on how far his people had come. Once isolated conquerors, They now stood alongside strangers turned allies, united by shared purpose. Perhaps this was their true strength, not just survival, but the ability to inspire change. As the fleet prepared to depart, Kale delivered a final message to the remaining Vaylith. "You are not alone," he said simply. "We will fight together. Always." The departure from the Vaylith system was bittersweet. The fleet carried with it a mix of emotions: relief at having struck a blow against the Veil, sorrow for the lives lost, and determination to ensure such devastation would never happen again. For the first time in their history, humans and Deathworlders worked side by side, not just as allies, but as partners. The fragile alliance forged under pressure had begun to solidify into something stronger. Repairs dominated the early days of their journey back towards safer space. Ships limped along, their crews exhausted but resolute. Mai spent long hours aboard the Iron Vanguard, collaborating with Zixra and other engineers to patch damaged hulls and recalibrate failing systems. Their teamwork became legendary within the fleet. Mai's ingenuity combined with Zixra's brute efficiency created solutions no one thought possible. Word spread quickly, earning them nicknames like the Miracle Mechanics. Even Kel couldn't help but smirk when he saw how seamlessly they operated together. But it wasn't just about fixing ships. Across the fleet, bonds deepened between species once divided by mistrust. Human medics treated wounded Pyrrhicans, while Xirak navigators shared star charts with human pilots. Conversations that began as practical exchanges evolved into genuine friendships. Stories were swapped over shared meals, tales of survival on harsh planets, childhood memories, and dreams for the future. These small moments reminded everyone why they fought. Not just to survive, but to build something better. Cal Draxus observed these changes quietly, his sharp eyes noting every interaction. He called a meeting with his advisors, including Elena Vega, who had become an unofficial liaison between humanity and the Deathworlders. "This alliance," he began, leaning forward on the conference table, "isn't just about defeating enemies anymore. It's about creating strength where there was none before." Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're right. We've proven we can work together. Now we need to make sure this unity lasts." To that end, plans were made to formalize the partnership. Earth offered advanced quantum processors scavenged from ancient ruins, technology capable of enhancing ship AI and navigation systems. In return, the Deathworlders shared resilient alloys and energy-efficient shielding designs. Both sides recognized the value of mutual growth, not just for themselves, but for any civilizations they might encounter in the future. Amidst the rebuilding efforts, memorials were held for those who had fallen. Lyran's sacrifice was honored with a ceremony broadcast across the fleet. Her holographic image appeared briefly, glowing softly as her recorded voice echoed through the ships. Hope lives when courage does. Crew members bowed their heads in silence, vowing to carry her legacy forward. For Kale, the experience changed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Once driven solely by survival, he now understood the power of protecting others, even strangers. During a rare moment of solitude, he stood on the bridge of the Iron Vanguard, staring out at the stars. Mai approached cautiously, holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. "Thought you could use this," she said with a tentative smile. Kale accepted the mug, raising an eyebrow. "Still trying to poison me?" Mai laughed, though her tone softened. "Just thought you deserved a break. You've done more than anyone expected." He sipped the tea, grimacing slightly but saying nothing. After a pause, he glanced at her. "We did this together, not just me." Her smile widened, and for a moment, the weight of everything they'd endured seemed lighter. Hope wasn't just a word. It was alive in their actions, their choices, and their willingness to keep moving forward. As the fleet charted its course toward new horizons, the galaxy watched. Rumors of the Deathworlder fleet's victory spread, inspiring awe and fear. But one truth remained clear: united, they were unstoppable. The Deathworlder fleet prepared to leave the Vaylith system, their ships repaired and their spirits renewed. Before departing, the Veilith gifted them a crystalline artifact, a shard of ancient technology containing fragments of knowledge about the Veil's origins. Lurin's voice echoed one final time through the fleet's comms as the artifact was handed over. "Take this," she said, her holographic form flickering softly. "It holds secrets we could not decipher. Use it wisely, and may it guide you in your fight." Cal Draxus accepted the artifact with quiet reverence, his metallic exosuit glinting under the dim light. He turned to address the assembled crew members gathered on the Iron Vanguard's bridge. "This isn't the end," he declared, his deep voice resonating through the room. "The Veil still exists out there, lurking in the void. But today we've proven something important. Together, we are stronger than any threat." His words struck a chord. Across the fleet, cheers erupted, ragged but heartfelt. For the first time, humans and Deathworlders celebrated not just survival, but unity. They had faced an enemy that fed on fear and despair, yet they emerged unbroken. The victory wasn't perfect. Scars remained, both physical and emotional. But hope burned brighter now, fueled by shared purpose. As the fleet set course for new horizons, plans were made to expand their alliance. Earth's diplomats worked tirelessly to formalize agreements with the Deathworlders, ensuring resources and knowledge would flow freely between them. May and Zixra spearheaded joint engineering projects, designing hybrid technologies that combined human ingenuity with Deathworlder resilience. Their innovations promised to revolutionize interstellar travel and defense systems, making the fleet even more formidable. Kale delivered a stirring speech before the fleet entered hyperspace, addressing every ship via broadcast. Standing tall on the bridge, his towering frame silhouetted against the stars, he spoke with unwavering conviction. "For too long, my people believed strength meant standing alone. We survived because we trusted no one, not even each other. But now I see clearly, true strength lies in protecting those who cannot protect themselves, in fighting not just for ourselves, but for others." His words earned thunderous applause, even from the most skeptical factions within the fleet. Azarthik, the Pyrrhican leader who had once dismissed the mission as futile, approached Kel afterward. "You've changed us," he admitted gruffly, clicking his mandibles in respect. Maybe there's value in this alliance after all." The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Reports trickled in of Veil activity detected in distant systems, hinting at its regenerative abilities. But instead of fear, the fleet felt resolve. They had faced the abyss and stared it down. Now they carried the tools and the will to confront whatever came next. Mai stood beside Zixra on the observation deck of the Aurora, watching as stars streaked past the viewport. "Do you think we'll ever really stop it?" she asked quietly. Zixra tilted her head, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the light. "Doesn't matter if we do or don't," she replied. "What matters is that we keep trying. That's what makes us different from the Veil." May smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she hadn't known since the battle began. Somewhere along the way, she'd found family among these unlikely allies. And though challenges lay ahead, she knew they wouldn't face them alone. Finally, the fleet emerged from hyperspace near a neutral trade hub, where news of their victory spread like wildfire. Civilizations across the galaxy watched in awe as humanity and the Deathworlders stood side by side, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The legend of the Deathworlder fleet grew, inspiring others to join their cause. As Kel gazed at the swirling nebula outside his window, he allowed himself a rare moment of pride. Once feared only for their power, the Deathworlders were now respected for their courage and compassion. They had become something greater than themselves. And somewhere beyond the stars, the devouring Veil stirred again, unaware that its greatest foe was no longer a single species, but an entire united galaxy ready to stand against it. The dawn of a new era had begun.